I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Krisstina. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
So I've kind of been like cyber stalking you for a little while, like reading your book and listening to your podcast and everything. And you have a really interesting, sort of backstory because of course, it wasn't an easy road for you. So can you share with the audience a little bit of that sort of journey that you had?
Yeah, well, it's been quite a ride for many of us, but I wish I could say like money was easy and I started off good and went to great and, figured it all out. My story is figuring it all out by a bunch of failure and trial and error through a life journey. But I think really at this stage of my career and my business and what I do, it's really thorough and thick the way the way I teach money from all these different aspects, because it's been such a ride over the years, because I've picked up so many lessons along the way. But my story starts in a trailer home. So that's where my money story began, is that not even a double wide. I mean, it was a travel trailer on the back of somebody else's land that my parents were able to put their little trailer on. And so from a young age, I mean, that's where we started, is that we didn't have much. And going through school in the town, it was a very poor education. It was kind of backwoodsy, if you would. But even going through that experience, what happened is that I never felt like I fit in. I was always excluded because we were poor. We didn't have money. And a little kid just always wants to be included, but I wouldn't be, invited over to sleepovers or to whatever the case was. So I finally figured out ways from a young age to earn money. And what I learned from this young age that was helpful in many aspects but was very detrimental, later in my adult life, was that I associated having money with being valued or being accepted. Because once I was able to have my own money and I could buy the right label clothing, my clothing wasn't hand-me-downs. I didn't have to be in the lunch line for the free lunches. When I could start buying these things, all of a sudden I got invited over. So I became very motivated to make money and have things, to buy this acceptance. And again, that started at a very young age. You think like 6 to 8, and then that continued all the way, putting myself through college and so on and so forth. So that appeared to work really well. And what I did is after college, I got into real estate. Even though I got an accounting and finance degree, I got into real estate. And the great thing about real estate is that there's no real ceiling to the income. If you're a hard worker, you do the job. And so I was one of those. And what happened is it was a pretty nice ride. Like for 7 years, I just became top in sales in my town year after year after year. And it was a really nice income. And this was like 25 years ago. And I thought I won the lottery, right? I mean, I made more money in a year than my parents would make in a lifetime, and then some. So what did a poor kid do that came into kind of this lottery win of money? Well, I bought everything I couldn't afford as a child. I bought all the acceptance that I could, and everything looked really good on the outside. And I fully leveraged my life with all these payments for the big house, for all the cars, for, you name it. I was in it. So that appeared to be working really well until I found myself divorced, single mom of 2 kids, paying child support. And because I was a primary wage earner, I got gifted, I guess, with the tax liens and the credit card bills that I didn't even know existed, because I didn't touch the money. I was just great at making it. I was scared to death of it other than making it.
Right.
So I found myself in this really terrible financial crisis and situation, like existential financial despair, because I didn't know how I was going to feed my children. And the only way that we were able to survive, to kind of get out of the situation, is I had peers, I had friends at work that pitched in, and they paid the utility bills for 6 months. They brought over food and blankets and leftover furniture, which thank God for them, because, I don't know how we would have made it if it wouldn't have been for, their generosity. But it brought up all this shame in me, because now I'm having to take charity again. I mean, that feeling of taking charity as a kid, even though it was very generous from those giving, the receiving part, I always felt less than. So now I'm in that same situation. So that became like this first pivotal point of learning about money, because what baffled me is I didn't understand how I made all that money, and I was top in sales and top in commission income, yet I was dead broke and, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Like, I couldn't make sense of it. Like, it didn't make sense at all. So that I just thought, well, there's nobody to dig me out of this one. I'm going to have to figure it out myself. So that set me on this journey, just a personal journey, that I made this declaration, this personal declaration, that if there's a way to get good at money and you can learn this shit, I was going to learn it. I never wanted to be in that situation again. So that's really sent me on this, like I said, personal journey. Professionally, I was, real estate investor. I did real estate businesses. I had many businesses. I was known from a public identity, female entrepreneur, female success story, industry leader. Privately, I was really learning how all these mechanics of money and how to do it. And one of those fundamental lessons is that I like to, kind of leave nuggets maybe as part of my own journey, is that, we have this belief that the answer to all my money problems is to make more money. So we're always in the quest and the chase to make more. But that's the trap. Like, if we're always chasing and we always think that making more money is going to, fix our money problems, that's the big fat lie. It's not about how much money we make. It's really about what we do with the money that we make and how we keep it and how we spend it. So that's what I learned from the masters, is that how you get wealth, there's a difference between income and wealth. Income's on the balance sheet. And income's on the profit and loss, and wealth is on the balance sheet. And so I called it balance sheet thinking. I just became obsessed with this thing called the balance sheet. So that worked really well, but now at least I wasn't, high income broke, living check to paycheck. I had assets and wealth and some passive income at the time that was coming from those assets. But what I didn't realize for kind of the next run was I was still attached to that self-worth, attached to my identity, what other people thought about me. And even though I wasn't, like I said, high income broke, all the labels mattered. And no matter where I got to the rung on the ladder of success, I never felt good enough. Happiness and worthiness must be at the next rung of the ladder. And that's kind of fatal flaw number one, is we keep believing that feeling of satisfaction, that feeling of happiness, that feeling of, life is really good. It's not where we are, it's somewhere out there. And it's really that money associated with that way people think of us based on the car we drive, the house we live in, the vacations we go on, and, that type of thing, that again is very cultural, especially, in our country, where really it's called keep up with the Joneses for a reason. We want to fit in. So what happened in that is I literally worked myself to death. I mean, no matter where I was never present. I was always in the future trying to figure out the next deal or the next this or the next that or the next award that I wanted. And I just missed, I just was never, wherever I wasn't there. And then I ended up getting really sick a handful of years back. Really just, my body just gave out. My lifestyle was unsustainable because I was also running a marathon. I mean, being a mom, just doing everything. And my body gave out. And what I learned then through a 2-year journey to try to save my life and get my life back, and going through that, is I realized I still hadn't figured out money. So great, I had wealth, but I traded my health for wealth. And now I was having to trade all my wealth to get my health back. And it was ugly. And I felt on my kind of proverbial deathbed, and literally at that point, all I did was was like just swimming in shame and guilt and remorse, feeling sorry for myself, just like I haven't even lived yet and I'm dying. Are you kidding me? With this realization that happiness is right here, and it doesn't matter about the amount of money. The money matters, but it's not about the chase of the money. Money's an inside job, and we have money to be able to have time to be in the present, to be able to have money to have experiences with our loved ones. It's really to underwrite the cost of living a good life, not just about more money. So that got me on this quest to figure out, like, how much money is enough? because I was in the chase, like no matter how much money I had, it was never enough. I just meant I need to get more and more and more. And funny enough, I remember like in my late 20s, when I first started my career, I thought, you know what, I have $1 million. I'll just not work so much, and I'm going to be on a beach somewhere and be doing this and doing that. First $1 million, I just worked harder, because now I wanted my 2 million. I wanted to work harder. I wanted my 3, like it never stopped, right?
Yeah.
So that was that thing of like, there's got to be a number where there's enough money to get out of this game of never enough. So that's where it kind of took us to where we are now, as I realized that I needed to know my enough number and really redesign my life, that my life and those in my life are most important to my experiences and my memories. I wanted to hit my next deathbed with lots of memories, and then just knowing how much money is enough to underwrite the cost it takes to fully experience the life as I want it. And then made my life and my planning about creating that number. And at the same time, what I found is that I was always in a race. Like it was always like, how fast can we get there? One, like there's a there, and I realized there's no there out there. There's only a here. And it's always like faster, faster, faster. So that's that part of like adrenaline, and all of it, again, it's just this trap that we get stuck in. And so I just realized, like, no, what money's for is really money buys time, money buys space, and money buys experiences. And so that's what my life became about. And coming out of that experience, I just learned so much along that journey that I decided I just want to teach it. I want to teach the aspects of money, and really realizing through that experience and afterwards, I've made millions, lost millions, made millions, lost them, making them again, doing well again. But it's just like this yo-yo. And there's another piece there that I think back in my mind before I kind of figure out this last piece was, I think I was attached to, like, I wasn't worthy of keeping the money. I was really great at making it and having it and all these things I was really good at. But then I'd just make some life decision or something would happen that the money would just like vanished. And again, I think it was attached to that worthiness piece. There's so much connection between worthiness and money. Sometimes we don't feel worthy so we don't make enough or have enough. Sometimes we don't, we make enough and have enough, but we don't feel worthy, so we lose it, or we're afraid of losing it. So money still owns us and controls us. And I realized, like, I was afraid of losing my money again. So money now, it's like I teach it from this aspect of, it's really this blend, this synergistic blend of the spiritual, metaphysical side of money, all these underneath principles, laws, and spiritual principles, really, and our relationship with money, our mindset with money, that are more elusive and metaphysical, but are very real and important. Our stories with money, our backgrounds with money, our money program is set by age like 7 to 9. So most adults are still working underneath that programming of our 7 to 9-year-old self, and that's what's still running the money show. So there's that piece that we want to look at, combined with money is very practical and pragmatic, like it's a truth teller. So when we can face the truth and look at it and start following these money laws skillfully, money's an easy thing to master, where it becomes less of this thing that we work for and wonder where it goes and why we don't have enough, to something where it's a beautiful tool and system that we have as part of our lives, like eating healthy food or having great relationships. It's just another piece of life that's really important and fun and meaningful to have a really good relationship with. So that's, through that woven life story is where I've wound up today.
Well, and I love the message that you give about learning to manage the money that you have right now, because, I come from a financial background as well. And that was always the thing. I think that, I too learned that lesson the hard way, made tons of money, and then, looked, had that look on the outside of everyone's like, oh God, you're so successful. Meanwhile going, there's a lot of debt there. I actually don't own anything. Like everything had a payment attached to it. Right. And I, kind of had that realization of, I actually own nothing, like nothing is mine. Everything could be taken away, in a moment's notice. And I think, once, and that's why I say it, I think it's so refreshing that you teach on how to think that way, because once you can get comfortable with where you are and being able to live in that, I think that's almost, to me, where my sustainability became, because I realized, I didn't have to make more money. I could live comfortably where I was. So when I made more money, I wasn't like spending, because like you said, now I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses. Now, I have to have, I have to live that that look. I have to live that perceived notion of, if I have this much money in the bank, this is what I need to drive. This is the neighborhood I need to live in, and I think that is so refreshing.
Well, there's actually, there's a law there. So it's many times it's used in the time category, but money's time when you break it down. And it's called Parkinson's law. And the Parkinson's law of money, and let's say law, meaning this is a rule, to pretend it's etched in stone. And Parkinson's law of money has kind of two facets. The first part of it says expenses will always rise to match income. So what that means, I mean, it's an invisible force like gravity. You don't see it, you don't feel it, you don't notice it, it just happens. And it happens because it's very biological, and it's called expense creep. But what happens, we're straight out of college, we're making $50,000 a year, our expenses are $50,000 a year, and we have this back in our mind, well, when I make 100, I'm not gonna feel so broke all the time. But what happens, our lifestyle is matched up to everyone else that's making $50,000 a year. Same cars, same apartments, same clothing, same nights out, same restaurants, same, if you can afford a vacation or staycation, right? That's what everybody else is doing in that bracket. So now all of a sudden you've doubled your income, and now you're making 100,000 take home, let's say after taxes. And that's what's going to happen in that bank account is, I mean, what's going to happen is do you keep the same apartment? Do you keep the same car? Do you keep, no, you're going to want to go with everybody else. And so you trade in the Honda and you trade it for the next thing, or you trade in the apartment for the first house. And there's nothing wrong with buying your first house, but what the lenders don't tell you, the lenders don't care. The mortgage bankers don't care if you don't put your kids through college. They've got the perfect algorithm to max out, to make sure that your house broke as much as possible, so they can get the biggest compounding, meaning they're going to lend you as much as they can with that risk factor. So if they lend you a little bit more, there's a risk that you'll default based on your income ratios, but they're going to max it out. So that doesn't leave any room for, these other things that we need to have, like the margin to build wealth. So that's that naturally we just want to fit in. And so next thing we know, our expenses match $100,000. Then we think, man, I just feel broke at the end of the month when I make $250,000. But that will go on forever. It will never change unless we put stopgaps in there so we don't fall victim to that law. The next part of the law says what was once a luxury becomes a necessity. So with every pay raise becomes the next level of necessities. And that's just to say that now we go up to 100,000. Let's say we go up to 250 a year. It's a COVID year or something, and now we go back down to 100. And now, do our expenses go down to match that 100? No, we've gotten used to the lifestyle at 250, and we don't want to let go of that. Like, we feel entitled to it.
So I can't use no name brand ketchup.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's just understanding that there's actually these invisible principles at work. But when we learn these and we understand them, it's like, oh, okay, I don't have to fall victim to that. Like, now I know what to do so that I can use that in my favor as opposed to it working against me.
And I think it's really important for people to, I love that you said that, because I think it's important for people to stop and even realize in themselves, when am I doing that? Because I even remember, when I got the letter, was the last payment of my vehicle, and I was excited. Like, I was like, yes, I'm done paying. And my husband's first instinct is like, well, let's go look for a new car for you. And I was like, well, I just paid this one off. I was like, no, right? But his thing is like, well, let's get, let's go and get you a new one. And I was thinking, I got excited a little bit, and I was like, oh, like a new car would be nice. And then I thought, no, you know what? Like, 4 years I had this loan. So 4 years I want to not have this loan. Like, I just want to, there was nothing wrong with the car, but I thought, isn't that funny that the first instinct, in me was like, oh, okay, well, I'm done paying it. So, let's go get a new one and, pay it again, because I could afford it. And I had to really stop myself and go, no, let's think about what else can we use that money that was allocated. Where else can we put it instead of just jumping back into another loan? And now I don't care. I love my car. Right? I'm like, I love you because I don't have to pay for you anymore.
And it's understanding the trade-off cost too. So when we're in the wealth game, you use a calculator a lot more often. And so that's such a great example. Thank you for sharing that. And again, been there, done that myself for sure. And what happens is that part of the difference between playing the wealth game and playing the other game just kind of maximize your income and maximize your payments, is that what happens is that, to your point, you don't own anything, but our entire life is owned by the banks. So we're either making the interest and making wealth, or we're paying interest and creating wealth for the banks. They're really mutually exclusive. So when you look at, let's just say it's a $750 BMW lease payment, because now we have to drive a BMW. We can't afford it, the payments, so we lease it. We want to look good in that car. And there's a statistic that we don't trade car for car. You're making the point here. We trade car payment for car payment. So families will go 40 years having at least one car payment, because now they get married and they have kids. And so there's at least one, sometimes two or more car payments, especially the higher incomer, because now if your kid turns 16 and they're entitled to a car, and we don't have the cash to buy it. So let's get a loan. We have great credit and we can afford it, quote unquote. If you put that into a compounding calculator and you just compounded that $750 a month for 40 years, let's say at an 8% interest, it's close to $5 million. So what you did is you sacrificed your future self for your future self. You sacrificed $5 million that would have compounded using that $750 payments. Instead, you used that for the new car, every time that was paid off. And that's what we don't understand. And it's just because we don't understand it because we're never taught in school. Once we understand these things, it's like, hell no, I'm not. I'm going to drive this thing till the wheels come off.
Yeah.
I have wealth and I want to put that $750 or $1,000. The average car payments these days are $700.
I know.
And what's happened, it's not just because the car, but people are trading in their cars when it's underwater and it still has a balance on it. And so now, it's understand that the game is rigged. The banking game is rigged. And so when you go to the car dealership and they seem like your friend and they're saying, hey, we just wrapped that up and it's just a $100 bump in your monthly payment. And you're like, oh, I can afford it. But we just feel like this will work forever, but we don't understand the trade-off and the cost. And so again, when we're concerned about wealth and what wealth is passive income from assets. Wealth is assets. And so we want to start moving from being a consumer to being an owner. Like you want to own your things, right? You want to own your car. So then you can drive it and you don't have to give the banks that monthly payment. Maybe you get a payment for your first car, but then that's it. Then you save the money or do whatever you're going to do. I mean, cars do break down, but cars these days drive many years without dying. Early on, you'd have to get newer cars because they didn't last that long, but those things can, go 10 years these days. So it's just understanding, again, some of these numbers and to know that I want to, I call it become your own banker, where you want to collect the interest. You don't want to pay the interest. And what I mean by collecting the interest is all that compounding interest that you collected over the 40 years by investing that $750 a month instead of spending it and giving that compound interest to the banks. So, the banks, the credit card companies, they're so skillful, even as a fine print, how, if you look at your credit card bill, all the balances and different things are at the very bottom. They're just going to make what they want you to see in the big bold print. So it's to understand the game is rigged. And so, but once you understand the rig, again, you can circumvent all that and do money your way. But at the end of the day, you're not doing what everybody else is doing. What seems like the sensible thing to do and most common sense, like, oh, the car's paid off, let's get a new one. It's pretty much wealth exists on the exact opposite of everything that feels normal and looks normal. It's really kind of the antithesis, can't even say that word right now. Antithesis of that, thank you. So we want to move from borrower to lender. We want to move from consumer to owner. And we really want to buy assets and not payments. So we get the payments.
Well, and I think that's sometimes where people don't know what to do, right? Because they get, they get excited about that. So we'll just continue with the example of the vehicle. You pay off your vehicle, but then all of a sudden something happens. And I think a lot of people are like, well, I paid off this vehicle that I was paying $750. I no longer have that payment, but I don't have the money. Like, where did the money go? I was able to make it. And so this idea of like, really making a conscious decision. Okay, this, this payment is now coming up. Now, what am I going to do with this money? And really thinking about how you can grow that. And we hear a lot about, passive income and, how that is important. But I think there's almost a block for some people on that. So let's talk a little bit about what is passive income and how people can start to, create that and why that's important.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that all the time, right? Like if I say, what are your goals in 12 months? Like, well, I want to have passive income. I'm like, great. So tell me, what is passive income? Like, where is it going to grow on a tree? Like, where does it come from? What's your definition? So there's kind of two definitions of passive income. One isn't really passive income, but it can kind of fit in that category. And I think what most people are saying what they're meaning when they say this is they're looking at in their business, meaning some kind of passive income stream in their business. So if they build this, if they're sell something online and they have this really great funnel and it works really well and it's mostly working on its own. So it's like this passive income. Sometimes it's, called mailbox money, like you set something up and it's mailbox money. And so I like to think of it as a trust fund. And a trust fund, so let's say parents or grandparents that set up this really killer trust fund for, let's say the grandparent did for the grandchild. And let's just say there was $5 million in this trust fund. And the rule of the trust fund is you can't touch the $5 million, but you, grandchild, get to live off the dividends of that trust fund. And let's pretend it's 5% per year. So I think that's roughly $250,000. So what that means is that for the entire life of that child, if you're not dipping into that $5 million, they get trust fund of $250 a year because the grandparents put it in, you couldn't touch the principal. Now, that's what a trust fund kid is. So what do they get to do? They get to do whatever they want with their time as long as they keep the cost of their lifestyle under $250,000. And so they can work if they want to and create a business. And because that feeds them, they can sit on a beach, they can travel the world, whatever they want, as long as it's within that budget. So what we have to do is we don't have a trust fund. We have to, and so my point is that's passive income. What passive income is non-working income. That trust fund child doesn't have to work for the money. It's mailbox money. That money shows up every single month and the trust fund baby uses that money to pay their bills. That's what passive income is, like in the true definition. So what we need to ask ourselves is if we don't have a trust fund that mom and dad or grandparents have set up for us, like if we're going to be responsible for this future cash flow, we're going to have to create our own trust fund. And the only way to do that is to use our time and money to let money grow, where we're putting a portion of our working income in. And then the money will build on that money. That's what compounding is. And over a certain period of time, if it's 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you choose your number, then you have your trust fund. So then, if you have your $1 million, it's 5%, you could pull out $50,000 a year if that was it. So you're like, oh, if I have $1 million, I have $50,000 of passive income that I can pull out of that asset. $2 million, $100,000. Just do the math. That's some really rough kind of rule of thumb numbers there. It is a place to get started. So when we look at how much money is enough, we're always looking at from 2 points. Is to understand during our younger years while we're working for two selves. We're using that young, youthful energy, right? That's so, young and inspired and lots of energy, can work for days on end and not sleep a whole bunch. And that feels when you're younger that you're going to have that energy forever, but you get older and you get tired of the grind, you get tired of the hustle, you just get tired, right? Our bodies, that's what happens as we age. You hit kind of mid 40s, early 50s. You're like, I just don't want to do this anymore. But if we've not been using that younger self to put away that money to build that trust fund, we have to go to work just as hard to make that same amount of income to pay the same amount of bills. And that's what we don't understand. That's what that treadmill is. That's what that, that hamster wheel, whatever, metaphor we give it. But when we have our trust fund, what we're looking at is this is something people can do as they're listening is quantify how much it costs to live your life right now. So how much does it cost to live? Let's assume you have no payments other than your mortgage payment. And then really look at that. And what we realize is when we get rid of the payments, we're not stacking the cost of our monthly, like every time we get a payment, we're increasing the cost of our lifestyle. So when we look at well, if my cars were paid off, if my credit cards were paid off, if the student loans were paid off, if everything and all I had to do was my rent or my mortgage payment, how much would it cost to buy food and groceries, have money for travel, have money, to go do some nice dinner with friends, like quantify it. Now let's pretend it's $100,000 a year. And you alluded to this as well, is that when we don't have payments, the cost of living a good life is actually pretty affordable. It's not as expensive as we think. We realize, like, I can live a life just like this. And if this is good as it gets, it's good enough. Great. If it blows out, awesome. But this is a pretty good life. This allows me to live the way I want to live. So if it's $100,000, then we need $2 million in that trust fund that we're building towards. So our younger self then has to make, however much money, $100,000, let's say if that's the cost of our life right now, add on the cost of taxes, because we can't spend our tax money. We can only spend after tax money. So we have to add on our tax percentage, and we have to add on our margin, because wealth is created the margin of that amount of money that we're going to invest on a monthly or annual amount on top of that. And then when we stack those three numbers, that tells us how much money we need to make to be able to hit our trust fund number in 10, 20, 30 years. And the reason why it's important to start younger is we have more time. Time is your biggest asset when it comes to wealth. So the longer that we wait, that means we're just going to have to make a lot more and invest a lot more in order to be able to have that money available when we're ready to, just to slow down a little bit. And at the end of the day, it's not about retirement. I mean, retirement's great. Some people like that number, but it's really just about freedom, choice, and time. And to have that space, that elbow room where you don't feel like, man, if I don't make it, if I don't make the business happen this month, what's going to happen? So it's about peace of mind. It's about stability, peace of mind, space. It just takes away that constant financial tension that's running for most people.
Yeah. And I think, it's important for people to really, look forward, like you said, and think about, what do you want those later years? And I don't like saying retirement, because that word scares me, because I'm like, God, I'd be so bored. I don't want to retire. I'm okay to work, but I do want the choice to be able to choose. Like, I want to be able to say, you know what, this month I'm going to work, next month, hopefully we can do that again, but let's go travel or whatever. And for me, that retirement piece, is that choice. I want to be able to say yes or no very easily, and not really have to worry about that. But I also really like the point you made of deciding how much money it is that you actually need to live with, because I think we do get caught in the, well, I have to have, the new car, I have to have this big house, and really sitting and going, but do you? Like, I even sometimes I was listening to one of your podcasts, I was looking around the house and I thought, I'm going to put a sticky note in every single room of the house. And then anytime I go into that room, like, I put it by the light switch, and I thought, anytime I go into that room, I'm just going to put a little mark on it, because I'm curious how many rooms I don't go into in my house. And I only did it for a couple of days, and I realized there's rooms I don't go into. Like, I don't really need this space. But I didn't realize it. Like, it never clued into me until I had sort of, I guess, the document sitting in front of me of realizing I could downsize if I wanted to and still be happy, because this is just a glorified storage room.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. Yeah, and the more you simplify your life in a way, and realize that you need less to be happy, and in fact, quite the opposite. So much of what we kind of this stuff that we're adding on to our lives is actually complicating it and making it unhappy, even though we think it's making us happy, or we buy it to make us happy. Once you start like shedding, it's just so freeing. I mean, same thing. I had a beautiful, multi-million-dollar house in Austin Hill Country, and same thing. It's like I wouldn't go in most of the rooms, and so it's an asset, and I lease it out. But I just moved to a little 1,300 square foot house, and it's charming and cute and small, and it takes care of itself. I'm like, I have so much more free time to go do all these other things, and I can lock in and leave it for the most part. I don't have to be taking care of it all the time and sinking money into it all the time. It's this big thing that likes to consume lots of money. And just realized, and I have fewer things. I just gave them away or sold them. And man, I can't even tell you, like, we don't even know how heavy we are by all this additional stuff that's weighing on us that we don't realize until it's gone. You realize, like, man, I just feel like I'm 10 years younger. I just have a different kind of skip in my step. And again, but this is just so normal. And we're in a consumption culture where every ad that comes with us every day, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, TV ads, Netflix ads, radio ads. I mean, ads are everywhere now. Like we can't escape it if we tried. And every one of those ads is saying, you're not good enough the way you are. But if you buy this or have this, now you're going to be able to be happy or feel better or fit in, or, whatever the subliminal messaging is all the time. So we really have to get out of that game and be committed to hit our numbers. And that's another money rule, that you have to know your numbers. You have to have a relationship with your money. You have to manage it. It's more important about how well you manage it and the time you spend with it and understanding it is than it is the amount of it. Because like I said, there's lots of high income broke people. And what I mean broke is if they don't go to work that next month, they can't pay their bills. And they have no emergency fund or liquidity or anything if a big life events happens, and those happen, and it leads to divorce and conflict, and money's a real issue. So it's a life skill that I just invite everybody to want to take some time. There's learning for all of us. It should be taught in school. It's not. If it was, I think the entire world, especially in this country, would be radically different, because it's not difficult things to learn. But we're all running in this autopilot it's a plane that's going to crash, right? Because we're not piloting it. We're kind of hoping the plane is going to get there on its own. And it feels like autopilot that's working. And it's also to know that high incomes are deceptive. High incomes make us feel rich, and it boxes us into a lifestyle that really drains us of the large majority of our wealth. The beauty about high income is that we can hit these trust fund numbers that I referenced much quicker. So when we know we can live off of this kind of fixed amount and really hold what I call our burn rate pretty tight, within reason. I'm not about rice and beans. I'm not about, sacrifice today for tomorrow. It's finding this really nice balance that it's probably, if you're taking 20, 30% off the top for your future self trust fund that I'm talking about, you can only live off of what's left over from that. So that's less than living on 100% of it, right? But your future self's going to be so happy looking back, to your 20-year younger self today and say, thank you so much, 20-year younger self, for doing what you did to set me up. And so just to know that those high income earners can build wealth and build wealth fast because they have more margin to be able to do that. The lower your income is, there's not as much margin opportunity. So what you do there is it's going to take longer to hit the same numbers at the end of the day. So that's what, these high incomes do, is they create this very expensive lifestyle that, that again is what everybody else is doing in that bracket.
Well, and I think this is,
you can't spend money.
Yeah. And I think this is a really good way, because I think what happens a lot of time too is, because like you said, learning about money is, it's not something that they teach in school. And I agree with you that it's been something that I've tried to advocate for lots of times. And also, our parents sometimes just, they don't know, right? So that you can only teach what you know. And so you're kind of, I think people that, are coming up are like, well, I don't even know, like, I'm on a wing and a prayer here. Like, I don't know about a retirement. Investment scares me, dealing with the stock market scares me. I don't want it, like real estate, like I'm out. I don't want to have to deal with all of that stuff. And I think this is just a good way to sort of get your feet wet, to really just change your mind and grow from there. Cause I think people try to, jump into the deep end and, invest in all of these things and create, all of these, quote unquote passive incomes to go, and then it gets overwhelming, and they still end up cash poor because they're trying to invest and, create all of these, shiny new things that are coming their way. So tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that you have that people can go to learn, because you have quite an extensive amount of, free offers and your book and stuff like that talk about this. So I'd love you to dig into those a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I do a decent amount of writing, and, I put out stuff all the time, and really just with this passion, desire to get this money knowledge out. And I think the way I teach it and write it, it's very understandable. And that's my intention, to make it that way. And it's meant to like help the reader understand it's completely doable for everyone. Believe me, I started in a trailer home and got a really crappy education. If I've been able to do what I've done, I promise you everybody can. I mean, seriously, like, dude, no joke. And just really, and it's written from my heart, like from these experiences. So one, people can Google my name and you can find all sorts of resources. I do have a podcast. It's called Wealthy Wellthy. And so I interview a lot of other experts in the money category. So that's not my advice, it's others' advice. But if anybody wants a free copy of my book or just a place to get started, it's my name, Krisstina, KN2Ss.com. And I have a free digital copy of my book. I have a webinar there that goes through the 5 truths of money that everybody needs to know in order to kind of get out of this rigged game that we're all in and we're unaware. So yeah, there's lots of free resources there. And then I have a money school. It's called Sovereignty Academy. And if anybody's like just ready to go back to like money school and learned everything we should have learned in somewhere in school, middle school, high school, college, it could start at middle school. Let's put it that way. It's just really getting down to the basics and understanding our money, our relationship with money, the mechanics of money, these universal laws of money. And we have to know that money's systematic also. There's there's these rules. You have to know your numbers. You have to be with your money. If you're afraid to look in your bank accounts, if you don't know where the money is, money evaporates. It falls through all these invisible holes and it's just never going to grow. You're going to stay in the place wondering at the end of the month, where does all the money go? It does. It like evaporates. So the only way to keep that from happening is to watch every dollar and to really be more in this mindset of gratitude. So some of these universal spiritual principles is that, we're all attached to what we don't have as opposed to being grateful for what we do have. And we can really be grateful for every dollar that comes in and for every expense that goes out, like being grateful for those utility bills in a way, like, man, we have electricity and the grocery bills, man, we get to feed our family and really start spending time with the money as opposed to being afraid of it or not wanting to spend time with it. I call it the money scale. We're just too scared to see what we must find. The only way to reverse out of that is really getting the money. So just understand that money has to be attended to. It really does need to be managed so that it can grow. It's a different game. The wealth game is different than the income game, radically different strategy. And you have to have a plan. You have to know how much money is enough, these numbers and your timelines. And again, this is very simple stuff to figure out. So, anybody that wants to go to money school, I call it like going to money night class. And so that's at Sovereignty Academy. But yeah, all sorts of ways. Most of everything I do is free and is out there for people to take and to learn from.
Well, and like I had said before, I'd been snooping through a lot of stuff. And of course, I've been reading your book and there's really great informative emails that come along with that. But I do really like that it is like the information that you're giving is simple. And I mean that in the nicest of ways, that it's easy to digest. It doesn't seem so overwhelming. It doesn't seem like, gosh, I don't know, like there's all these acronyms and there's all these like, what? Like you just get confused and then you want to shut it off. It's really easy that you're like, oh, I can do that. That's pretty easy. Like, I just need to know 1 + 1. I can do this, but I do love what you said, that it is important to, get over that fear that we all have of not wanting to look at our money, because we need to know, you need to look at it. You need to be aware of it. You need to feel the feels, as they say. And then, okay, now make a plan. And I think the plan is a really important part for people. So.
Yeah, it's like that. I like to kin to, let's just say it's been a COVID year and there's the scale there and we just walk around the scale, we've noticed things are feeling a little tighter. We're just not feeling as good. And, but the scale's there. We just avoid it, or we pretend like it doesn't even exist, or we hide it under the bed or something, right? There reaches a point where it's like, all right, I just need to step on the scale. It's just reaching a point. So you pick out the scale, you step on it. And the thing about the scale, it tells the truth. So the reason why we hide the scale is we don't want to face the truth. It's painful, because then there's these stories like, how did I let myself get this way? And, now we beat ourselves up and, this normal human condition. But then it's just part of it. It's like, all right, that's painful, but I did this. And so I'm just going to make a promise and a declaration. I'm sick and tired of feeling this way. I'm sick of feeling tired. I'm sick of this, and this. And today is the day I'm going to make a change. And it's with that declaration that then if you promise to make that declaration, now you're going to go find, is there somebody that's going to help me? I have a now intention. I'm going to drop 50. I'm going to get healthier by this time next year. I'm going to feel healthier than I've ever felt. And, just these very small little minor goals or intentions. And now, like, who can help me do this? Is it a trainer? Is it a nutritionist? Who do I know that maybe that they've had success with, or is there a program out there? And then work with that. And then that coach or that trainer, whatever, typically has a plan, a proven plan. And now you just follow the plan, but no plan, no results. we're just going to go back to, we're all habitualized. We're just going to go back to our habits. So it's really important when we get serious about something in our life that we absolutely positively want to change, because staying the same is miserably painful. The pain of making the change is far less than the pain of the day-to-day, just versus the death of 1,000 cuts. So that's just it. It's like, you know what? I'm going to get this money thing in order. I'm sick and tired of feeling this way. I'm sick and tired of the conflict. I'm sick and tired of the anxiety. I'm sick and tired of not understanding this. And today's the day. And again, go find the coach, the trainer, someplace to start, and then create a plan. And the plan is the guaranteed results. Just follow the plan. That's just it. The wheel's already been, created. We don't have to recreate it. There's so many, I have them, others have them. I'm an example of what's possible. My own plan has created what I have, and I am financially free. And, I'm in a place that a lot of people, I think, desire to get to. And I teach exactly what I did to do it. But it comes with that first step of like, today's the day. Otherwise, it's fine. There's no right or wrong or good or bad. It's just, if we're dissatisfied with our current situation, then nothing's going to change until we change.
I love that. I think that's a good tip. And to always, keep stepping back on that scale and looking at it, because that's the only way. It's much easier to make a micro adjustment, of going, oh, made a little slip there, ate that cake, probably shouldn't have eaten that cake, but we'll work it off, then going, good Lord, that's a little frightening there. So I love that. I love that analogy. So we'll make sure that we link to everywhere that people can find you and all of your resources. There was just so much packed into this episode for people. So I do encourage everybody to go out and, definitely follow Krisstina and all of the advice that she has, because there's all of these little nuggets everywhere. So even if you think you have your game like wrapped up in a pretty little bow, there was still some things that I was like, I forgot about that. I need to start doing that. So I think you always have to continuously
and I'm still learning. I am learning all the time. I'm updating my information as I'm learning. I'm still reading the books. I'm still growing, and I'm probably more at a master level, but there's the master of the masters, and, there's never an end to learning and growing. So absolutely. It's just finding somebody that's just a little bit farther ahead where we desire to be. And then, get there. And then maybe there's somebody else that takes us on the next part of the journey. And that's the beauty of kind of give and take and, reciprocation and growth. So it's a beautiful experience when we're all in this together.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time and all of your knowledge. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
As many of you know, money and numbers are my jam. It was what I started my career out in and still use to this day. And I really love getting to sit down to talk with other people, not only to learn their money story, but to learn some of the techniques that they've used to help take themselves to the next level. It's always something that I find I can learn from. And I would suggest that you head to our website at foxtalksbusiness.ca. Just click on blogs on the left-hand side of the page. You will see this episode and all of the ways that you can connect with Krisstina, but as well to be able to find more about her podcast, Wealthy Wellthy, and her academy that she has for if you're ready to take the next step, and as well to find her book, Falling for Money. It is a really great read. She wrote it very, very well, but there's a lot of tips that I think no matter where you are on the wealth spectrum, you're going to get something from reading this book. So I highly recommend it. So I want to thank Krisstina again for coming on, and for all of you for tuning in every week and listening and sending me your comments. I really do appreciate them. So if you have just a moment, head over to wherever you listen to our podcast, or if you like to put a face to the name, you can always head to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification buttons and give us a like on social media. It all helps us to make sure that we can bring more amazing guests like Krisstina to you. So no matter what you're doing today, whether you are trying to figure out your money for the first time or the 100th time, make sure that you take some time to have fun, because even when money's involved, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?